President Trump says his family is the victim of a witch hunt, but his choice to be boss of the FBI disagrees.
As the future FBI director, you consider this endeavor a witch hunt?
I do not consider Director Mueller to be on a witch hunt.
The president departs for France after insisting that he did not know about his son's meeting with a Russian lawyer until this week. Defeated and captured, Iraqi forces claim there are foreign militants among the IS fighters who surrendered in Mosul. No breakthrough in sight, the Arab Quartet tells the US Secretary of State that Qatar needs to address all their concerns. The King of Spain avoids a row on the future of Gibraltar on his state visit to the UK. And upsets at Wimbledon as big guns Andy Murray and Novak Djokovic both bow out of the tournament. Welcome to Sky World News. Donald Trump has described the investigation into his alleged collusion with Russia as a witch hunt. Among those who disagree is the man the US president has just asked to run the FBI. Chris Wray contradicted his boss at his confirmation hearing in Washington, insisting that he would not let politics get in the way of fighting for justice. In a TV interview, Mr. Trump has suggested that Moscow would have been happier if Hillary Clinton had been elected. Here's our US correspondent Greg Miller.
Where some see a White House under siege, Donald Trump tweeted today that it's functioning perfectly. Sky News, Washington.
Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz has told Sky News that while there's evidence of collusion with Russia of some form, he doubts it crosses a line into illegality.
I don't think there's any doubt that there was some collusion. The Russians certainly tried to influence the election.
President Trump has just departed for France to join Bastille Day celebrations at the invitation of French President Emmanuel Macron. Today and tomorrow, the two men, who are considered by many to be polar opposites in both policy and presentation, will meet as fellow commanders-in-chief, representing two powerful military forces. Iraqi security forces have released video of what they say shows foreign Islamic State militants they've captured in the city of Mosul. The fighters are said to have surrendered on Tuesday, even as sporadic clashes continue in the old city. Some IS militants are still holding out despite Iraq's prime minister declaring victory in the city earlier this week. Iraqi forces say pockets of Mosul remain insecure. Iraq's third biggest city has been heavily damaged by nearly 9 months of grueling urban combat to recapture the city from the extremists. The Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai has visited a refugee camp north of Mosul to highlight the importance of female education. Ms. Yousafzai, an activist who was shot in the head by Taliban in Pakistan 5 years ago, celebrated her 20th birthday visiting a girls' school in Hassam Sham camp. She said her message to world leaders is that girls are change makers and the world needs to invest in their education. Nearly 890,000 people have fled the fighting in Mosul, including thousands of children. US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has returned to Kuwait after a day of talks in Saudi Arabia with representatives of the 4 Arab countries boycotting Qatar. Mr. Tillerson's shuttle diplomacy this week has resulted in the US getting Qatar to agree to curtail the funding of terror groups, but has not led to a breakthrough in the ending the dispute. The Arab Quartet have said Qatar has not gone far enough in meeting their demands. Mr. Tillerson is now on his second visit to Kuwait this week, which is acting as a mediator between the two sides in the dispute. The King of Spain says he's confident his country and Britain can find a solution on Gibraltar which is acceptable to all involved. King Philippe raised the controversial issue in a speech to MPs and peers in the Houses of Parliament. The flag of Gibraltar was on display outside the building, and some MPs had threatened to walk out if the King renewed Spanish claims to the territory. Well, our senior correspondent David Bowden reports.
This is the first state visit to the UK by a Spanish king and queen for 31 years visit. David Bowden, Sky News, at Buckingham Palace.
The EU's chief Brexit negotiator has hit back at Boris Johnson after he said Brussels could go whistle for the Brexit divorce bill. Yesterday, the Foreign Secretary described the bill, estimated at more than €60 billion, as extortionate. But this morning, a frustrated Michel Barnier had a warning of his own, as our Europe correspondent Mark Stone reports.
Outside the EU Commission, the nymphs are dancing. Fed scenario, something Mr Johnson says there's no plan for. Mark Stone, Sky News in Brussels.
And Mark can bring us more from Brussels.
It is the EU's belief that the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, should have jurisdiction over the 3.2 million EU citizens living in the UK. Together and discuss those issues. That is when we are going to see both sides, to a certain extent, backing down.
Coca-Cola says it will increase the amount of recycled plastic in its bottles by 50% after pressure from environmentalists. The world's biggest drinks brand says it aims to meet its new UK recycling target by 2020. Sky News has been highlighting the amount of discarded plastic which ends up in the sea as part of the ocean rescue campaign. Becky Johnson reports.
Millions of plastic bottles are thrown away every single day. Use fewer bottles in the first place. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Let's take a look now at the stories making headlines around the world.
The Kuwait Times says talks in Riyadh between US Secretary Rex Tillerson and the quartet of Arab countries lined up against Qatar ended with no sign of a breakthrough in a dispute that's divided America's most important allies in the Middle East.
This is Sky World News coming up. World number one Andy Murray bows out of Wimbledon.
Store now.
Now the latest sports news.
This sports bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Get healthy, get rewarded.
Andy Murray is out of Wimbledon, losing in 5 sets to American Sam Querrey.
This is Sky World News, our top stories. US President Donald Trump insists he only found out a matter of days ago about his son's meeting with a Russian lawyer during the presidential election campaign. Iraqi forces claim they've captured foreign Islamic State fighters in Mosul as they continue to clear and secure the city days after announcing its liberation. And US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson continues his shuttle diplomacy in the Gulf in search of a solution to the standoff between Qatar and its Arab neighbours. A retired judge who investigated the high-profile and unsolved killing of a 4-year-old boy in 1984 has been found dead with a plastic bag over his head. It was the latest macabre development in a cold case that transfixed France more than 30 years ago and which took off again in recent weeks. 65-year-old Jean-Michel Lambert's death follows the arrest this week of 3 of Gregory Villemin's relatives. Scientists say an iceberg more than a quarter the size of Wales has broken away from an ice shelf in western Antarctica. A crack in the Larsen C ice shelf appeared more than 10 years ago as part of a natural process. Experts say the separation changes the landscape of the peninsula forever. US singer Ariana Grande is to become the first honorary citizen of Manchester in recognition of her response to the terror attack in the British city during her concert in May. The City Council passed the motion unanimously and said Grande had exemplified the resilient and compassionate way Manchester had responded to the attack. Heavy rainfall in Zhangjiang County in South China prompted this dramatic landslide which swept vehicles away and covered them in mud. Dashcam footage shows the moment the earth surrounding the road collapsed and overwhelmed cars and trucks in Guangxi Zhuang region. Rescuers pulled drivers to safety and the road remains impassable. Now with another look at today's newspapers, here's Anna Botting.
Hello there, you're watching Sky News and the press preview.